Nebraska Preps postgame with Damon Benning and Jacob Padilla.
I know everybody always jokes. They think I'm not being serious when I say it's probably more exciting for me than it is for him. I always enjoyed talking to Jacob Padilla, primarily because he's maybe one of a handful of people that nobody ever says anything bad about. So I know I'm probably keeping pretty good company because it's certainly not me, man. Welcome into another week of Nebraska Preps postgame. I'm sure Jacob's like, God, I don't even know why you like me. There's not a whole lot to me, DB. I just try to be authentic and let the chips fall where they may. But Jacob, that's plenty good enough, man. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you for the kind words.
Always,
and
man,
I appreciate you not
always.
mentioning football. So it's all basketball season. I got my Sun shirt on.
Hey,
Let's go.
You know what? I actually feel for you because I'm one of the rare non-Packer fans that actually likes Aaron Rodgers. I would take him of any starting quarterback in the league, not named Patrick Mahomes right now, and I wouldn't look back. So I'm with you on the whole Aaron Rodgers thing.
It's just so frustrating because I just don't understand a guy as smart as he is. It really did seem like that came down to him locking in on Adams and missing open guys time and time again, which he's fallen into that trap. Devontae is obviously really, really, really good, but there just got to be a way to score more than 10 points in that game.
This may be an unfair question because of your age, and maybe this is like the Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz discussion. Is it Rodgers or bust, or did you develop an affinity for Favre, even though you didn't watch him near as closely as you have Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, definitely. Like I caught the tail end of Favre and kind of that last year when they were awesome. That kind of really, because I actually started following them a little bit when they weren't good. Because my friend was a Packers fan, so I just started watching with him, and then I kind of adopted them as my team as well. So I didn't get to see the Favre Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff, but I enjoyed him for sure. But it's kind of seeing Rodgers and the way he elevated the way playing the game, like the decision making. He's just been so much fun to watch, and it's just frustrating to see this team go out the way that it did.
Is there a comparison? And in the NBA, it's different because after that second contract comes around, it's a crapshoot, and Nash has spent time with multiple teams, as has CP3. But is there a Favre, Rodgers, Nash, CP3 analogy in there for you for your favorite teams?
Probably, and that's kind of explains why I like the way I do. Obviously, living in Nebraska, this is a run-the-ball state, but I like watching people pass the ball. I like watching good quarterback play.
It's funny, too, how so off the pod, when we talk hoops, we always talk – you always gravitate towards chemistry and sharing.
Yeah.
But it fits your personality, though, because that's why people think you're so good-natured.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just fun to watch, like the ball move around and just great passes. And, like, anybody can go and hit a step-back jumper, and, yeah, that's cool or whatever. But, there's just – that's what basketball is supposed to be, like great ball movement, making plays for others. That's just what I like watching the most. And like you said, that's kind of the type of players I gravitate towards. And it is largely because Steve Nash was the guy that I grew up, kind of fell in love with basketball through watching him.
All right, so here we go, man. I felt like it was a very interesting week, and we get a couple of big matchups this week and multi-class, which we'll talk about in a second. But let's start in Class B, right?
Kind of have to, right? It
is the story, I think, because one team is really asserting their dominance. Everybody else is kind of chasing the pack. Let's start with Omaha Scott.
Yeah.
You called your shot a week ago. You were there was a little foreshadowing. Roncalli didn't get it done in their place, which is arguably the best environment in high school basketball going right now with the gym capacity and how fervent that fan base is. And Scott was a little shorthanded. Roncalli comes up short the first time around. Now, all bets are off with Scott now.
Yeah. River City Conference champs last week. They handled South Sioux City 75-37, and then it's kind of workmanlike 57-43 win over Roncalli. The Crimson Pride couldn't find a way to kind of take them to the wire this time. Scott was in control pretty much throughout that game from what I saw. And here they are, 13-0, and they've beaten number 2 in Class B twice already. One of them close, one of them not so much. So it kind of leaves you with, well, who is going to beat these guys? And the big one coming up is Tuesday at home against Lincoln Pius X. And so you get kind of little Class B, Class A, or Class A kind of crossover game there. And, man, if Scott wins that game, I was talking about this before the pod, but who's going to beat them?
And it's weird, too, because you talk about matchups. And Pius is the only team like them in Class A, much like Scott is the only team like them in Class B. They can go 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", and be comfortable playing that way. Pius' size, unique to them, especially in Class A. Will anything give, or are you all about the matchups and looking for something different to kind of reign supreme other than just the sheer size?
Yeah, that'll definitely be fun to watch, just kind of how the matchups play out. And Scott's obviously got the size, and Jake Brack and Nate Zarowski starting there, and they've got some size off the bench as well. It'll be interesting to see kind of how the defensive matchups work out, like who guards Sam Hostreiter, who guards Jack Hostreiter. Jack just had a good game last week, scored 21 in their last game.
Kind of defies what we talked about the week of in terms of how that offense should run and who it should run through. But, hey, we'll see if it's an anomaly or something that's portable.
Yeah, we'll get to them for sure. Obviously, again, this is a big game out. Planning to be there with kind of the Nebraska game getting scheduled. Kind of, unfortunately, took me out of the big one on Thursday, but did free me up to go see this one on Tuesday. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Again, I mean, if Scott gets by Pius on Tuesday, looking at Bennington on February 1st, and then after that, I mean, I don't know who else. Like, if they get past those two, then we're looking at, I mean, again, who beats them in Class B. Yeah. Well, obviously, when things get to the state tournament, you never know. But they clearly have established themselves by far as the best team in the class, and it's going to take an incredible effort for anybody to knock them off, I think.
Yeah, one of our peers in the business that likes high school basketball almost as much as we do, Mike Sauter, sent me a tweet in game the other day, and he affectionately said, "Our Jake." And I was thinking to myself, well, I'm not going to claim somebody else that has a family of their own. It's not my Jake or your Jake, but it is nice to see that I think the rest of the basketball world, especially at the high school level, is being introduced to how well he's playing for Omaha Scott.
Well, and they needed it, too, with Mitch Scholl doing
a little bit of everything.
First day of practice of the season, Mitch Scholl goes down with a knee injury, and they needed Jake because last year, Mitch was a key piece for them coming off the bench. Like, he was ahead of Jake in terms of production and the role he played for Scott. And Jake obviously had the tools, and now he's starting to he kept growing, kept getting stronger, and starting to round out his game now, and has been a big piece for them. And obviously, the seniors, James Ninifu, has really, I think, taken a big step as a senior this year, now kind of taken over as the leader in that backcourt. And Grant Dvorak is tough, versatile player on the wing as well. So and then JJ Farron's one of the better shooters in Class B. So
yes, he is.
Just really well-rounded team.
Doesn't seem like 170 pounds does JJ, right? It's like he looks kind of slight and kind of, oh, by the way, and then all of a sudden you take a couple of breaths and it's like, oh, that's a bucket. Oh, that's another bucket. Yep, feel like we better touch this guy. Get close, right? Like, for kind of how they play, defense first, they do have a little sneaky light switch offensive run you out of the gym component. They get a couple of stops in a row, then they score. Get a couple of stops in a row, they score, and all of a sudden you're down 8 and you wonder what happened.
Yeah, exactly right. That's you really got to hang in there with them because they will make you pay for a mistake, a turnover, or go in there and get a shot blocked, and they get runouts. And again, Ninifu is really good in the open court, so they're going to be tough to beat. I think we probably before going any further, we probably need to mention the single best performance in Class B last week.
Yeah, it'd be hard to top.
Double nickel from Connor Milken. Obviously, everybody who listens to us knows what Connor Milken can and does do for that team. But just 55 points on 20 of 27 from the field, only 3 of 7 from 3, and 12 of 13 from the free throw line, with 13 rebounds and 6 assists. 55 points and 6 assists.
Is the 6 assist more impressive than only 27 shots?
And only 3 threes as part of the 55 too. It's not like he just got hot; he just kept going.
So obviously,
stop him.
I spent a lot of time watching him online, and you know what I think kind of an underappreciated thing is? His team, they really like him. A lot of times when there's a guy that gets all the attention and his critics would label him kind of a volume guy, he is extremely well received by his teammates, which lets me know he's every bit the young man that I think he is. And yeah, I maybe lack a little objectivity just because I've coached him. I've known him since he's been just a little guy. The families are extremely close, but he's well liked, and I just think there's something to that when you can be the guy and your teammates embrace you being the guy. It's hard for kids this age and this generation to say, okay, hey, we acknowledge who and what you are.
And I think part of that is the way that Connor plays his role and how hard he plays. He's not a guy that's sitting back there and resting on defense and just taking every shot.
Which he's embraced this year, right? Like he has really evolved into, I got to guard the best player too.
And he crashes the glass every single game, like double-digit games or double-digit rebounds almost every game. And just incredible that game. Just kind of look at the box score. They scored 93 points against Nebraska City. He had either scored or assisted on 26 of their 36 field goals and was the only one that attempted a free throw. That's one of the best performances I think we'll see all season and for a long time.
Yeah, I for sure don't think you'll see that replicated again. And you have to go back some days until you see that kind of sheer efficiency on the offensive end while building up those kinds of numbers. You just don't see it very often.
And then they followed that up with a 58-48 win against Harlan in the Nebraska Prep Classic.
And they needed to get right.
Yeah.
I feel like they need a little confidence. Class B is really starting to sort itself out. I mean, depending on if Scud is at the top, however you parse through Beatrice, Roncalli, and Bennington, who I think will all kind of say something about it before it's over. And listen, Scotts Bluff is like, hey, I know you guys don't understand our level of opponents or who we're playing, in-state versus out-of-state. Here we are kind of building up a gaudy record, and Waverly's like, hey, careful. You probably don't want to play us either. So if it's Scott and everybody else, 2 through 7, I don't know. I guess figure it out.
Exactly right. And we talked about how Waverly had started to kind of put things together last week. And then they go and lose to Bennington on Monday and then follow that up with a loss to Wahoo. Those are both very good teams, but now Waverly's back down at 10-5. So, like, there's just no – I mean, like you said, that 2 through 7, Beatrice is kind of just hanging on there. 2 wins last week against Hastings and Ralston, sitting there at 10-2. Roncalli right there, 9-4 after the loss to Scott. Bennington, I think we've talked about them, how much they've improved recently, and a 3-0 week last week. And they continue to get it done with their depth. I mean, they've got so many different guys that can score in any given game, and they got wins over Waverly, Nebraska City Lords, and Norris. So those are 3 good wins for them, and they're sitting there at 12-3. And then you mentioned Scottsbluff, and they handled Gehring last week, so improved to 13-4. And they've got 2 more Nebraska teams with Alliance and Sydney coming up this week. So that is really tough. And we mentioned Platteview, who's kind of hanging down there at number 7 because of some of the losses they took. But again, coming off a really impressive week, and they've got their conference tournament this week as well.
How surprised are you at this juncture on January, whatever it is, 24th or 25th today, 24th, that there's only 2 undefeated teams in all of high school basketball?
That's crazy. And obviously we talked about Scott, and the other would be Humphrey Lindsay Holy Family down in C2, moving up. Not only that they're undefeated, one of the last two. It's that they moved up a class and continued to run through their competition. I was there on Tuesday.
Which is why I wanted to talk about it, because you saw firsthand something had to give there, and they proved to be every bit as good as their record.
Yeah, and the interesting dynamic about Humphrey this year is, so Jason Suits has been the guy for 3 years, 1,000-point scorer. He's been their leading scorer since he was a freshman. This year, Jacob, who is actually going to play baseball in college, has kind of emerged, and they've been running their offense through him, and he's been their leading scorer, leading rebounder, really good passer. They've been running their stuff through him, and I think Jacob's been just fine. He can kind of take a slight step back with the way that or Jason has been content to take a slight step back with the way that Jacob's been playing, because obviously it's working right now. So 15-0, Jacob had 20 points, 11 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks against Howells Dodge. It was a 47-45 win at Howells on Tuesday. Really good game, right down to the stretch. It was offense was tough to come by, but they found a way to make the plays down the stretch to pull it out.
Yeah, not surprised. You talk about environments, where that environment ranks with Ron Colley. You saw another good one at Westside and Prep, which we'll get to in a little bit when we talk about Class A. Where has been the most electric environment that you've been to thus far?
Yeah, it's definitely either Westside Prep or that Ron Colley Scott game. Man, that Ron Colley Scott game, like the noise in that place when they were going like down the stretch
right on top of you
at the free throw line, like the gym was shaking. Like they were jumping up and down, pounding the bleachers. The student section was leading it, and then the parents and fans were kind of joining in. Again, that place was absolutely rocking down the last 60 seconds or so of that game. In Scott Westside, man, the student sections were full of the top by halftime of the JV game, if not before. I think a security officer told us they had to turn away like 200 kids because they ran out of space for them.
Yeah, I thought your tweet was hilarious. If you're not here right now, don't bother coming.
And that was during the fourth quarter of the JV game. Like, it was, the place was absolutely packed. You had people kind of wandering in, and I know Sharif Mitchell and a couple of his crazy teammates slid in behind us.
Our athletic director went to go get them because they were kind of stuck and couldn't get in, and it's like, you don't get these guys at a game very often. Yeah. Is there anything we can do to get these guys in? So you get some Blue Jays in the house, and that one didn't disappoint. We'll get to that. Before we move on to Class A, no surprise, if you listen to this podcast, the one class that we said would be we felt like before we even started the basketball podcast this year, we said, look out for C1. C1 will be highly, highly competitive. And don't blink. You have 6 teams, Jacob, with 2 losses or less. Yeah. You got Wayne and Auburn obviously sitting there at 13-2. But how about this run? Concordia, who we said coming off maybe being a little ahead of schedule last year, at 13-1. Wahoo, we had them in our top 2 at 13-1. Kearney Catholic at 16-1. And there's Ashland Greenwood at 11-1.
Yeah,
4 teams with 4 losses between them, sitting atop Class C1.
And you look at kind of the NEB Preps coaches poll, 0 change, 1 through 10. Everybody's rock solid. Everybody took care of business last week. And then you even go like Milford at 7 is 12-3 and is a really good team. Ogallala 13-3.
I actually like Ogallala because they're going to have some dog in them.
Yeah, they got a point guard.
They got a coach who's pretty no nonsense. So that's just going to come with the territory.
Fort Calhoun 11-3, and they handed Concordia their only loss. O'Neill down at 10 with Landon Klassen kind of leading that. Sophomore Drew Morrow has been having a great season, really shooting the ball well. So, like, that is an incredible top 10. And you keep going, you go even deeper. Like, you've got DC West and Central City both receiving votes, and those are quality teams too. So, like, Class C1 is phenomenal, and it is deeper than any other class at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up Ogallala, excuse me. I've known Andy Gillen since I've been in college. I met him, Charlie, his dad, And he's like the villain, right? If you're not with Ogallala, it's the guy that draws everybody's ire. And I'm just thinking, one thing you're going to get with the Coach Gillen, coach group out there in Ogallala, they're going to play hard, and it's like Tom Petty, right? Won't back down.
He's really good at establishing that us against the world mentality.
That's his thing, man. Yeah. He's been like that since I've known him, and hasn't gotten off of it since.
Every game with a chip on their shoulder, for sure.
Let's hop over to Class A, because I want to ask you something here, and you can use any of the classes, because I think the team that I'm going to tell you about, and it's pretty objective. I'm going to ask you about upside. We're halfway through the season. It's starting to really sort itself out. What team out there do you think has the most room for growth based on where they are currently?
That's a good question. It probably has to be either Millard North or Bellevue West, just in terms of the players they have in the roles that they have. Obviously, Westside's got some young guys too, but that thing is on, like, they got that thing locked in. The rotations are on point. Like, you got those young guys coming off the bench in waves and just tearing apart bench units. You've got the seniors that are kind of holding down, seniors and juniors that are holding down that starting lineup. Whereas Bellevue West and Millard North, they both have kind of their core of upperclassmen, but I think they're relying on those young guys a little bit more than Westside is at this point.
Could I convince you if you're talking upside? And maybe you could get me on room for growth because Westside is playing so well. My question to you would be, could I talk you into it being either Westside or Bellevue West? Coach Simons has a ton of options, right? I mean, if he doesn't like the way a couple of starters are playing, he has the luxury of going to some consistency. You saw it the other night against Prep. He didn't like the start that Chandler Meeks got off to. He sat for an extremely long time, even with the 2 fouls. He rode the hot hand of Reggie Thomas, who hadn't been as efficient as he was against Prep. Bellevue West is interesting because they play so many guys, and now they have the addition of Jacob Arope. I think it's between – listen, I'm not going to thumb my nose at Millard North because I think you're onto something there, especially if that backcourt gets it going. Right, Harmon kind of showed out the other night without getting a lot of help from Jason Green, and it's like, whoa. They can pull that off without the lead dog being the lead dog. I don't know how much they want to make a living trying to do that, but I do like – I definitely think they're in the discussion, though, in terms of upside. Or how about Omaha Scott, who hasn't been healthy in terms of growth?
That's true. Like, if Scholl, I don't know kind of what the timetable is like for him. If he gets back, like, that
right.
Man, that adds another really good player to the mix, and not only a good player, but more player with size that is really tough for Class B teams to match up with. But
how about Pius if they want to figure out who and how they want to play through?
I think they obviously can play better, and I think they have. Over the last week, they played a little bit better, and obviously the big one on Tuesday. I think for the most part, those players are who they are, though. Basically, everybody in the rotation is an upperclassman except for Trayson Anderson.
Yeah.
So I feel like this season, like, those guys they could play slightly better, tweak some things about their approach. But in terms of looking at upside, I'm looking at young players improving and stepping into bigger roles. And that's kind of why I gravitate. You mentioned Millard North with Isaiah McMorris came alive, had a big game last week. Eli Gaith has been playing a little bit better. He's been double digits more than often than not.
How about McMorris going 9-9 from the field the other day?
24 points.
Listen,
a couple of threes.
They get any consistency in the backcourt, and all of a sudden they become extremely dangerous.
And that's why I point to them, because I feel like if those guys take a leap, there's more opportunity with some of the way, because they need obviously David Harmon and Jason Green.
They need a consistent third scorer.
They need a third, and they need a fourth. And if Neil Mosser, if Eli Gaith, if Isaiah McMorris, those are kind of the 3 guys. With the way we've seen Jackson Page kind of hasn't really put up big numbers this year. If they can get a little bit more out of any of those guys, whereas I feel like as well as Caleb Benning, obviously CJ Mitchell, even if those guys continue to progress, you kind of got those seniors that that are already playing less minutes than they did previously in their career. So I feel like there's kind of there's not necessarily as much room for a bigger role for those guys at this point. Whereas Millard North needs kind of those guys to emerge a little bit, so that's kind of why I include them in the mix.
I like that. So what if I look at it a different way? Who, in your opinion, if you're looking at West Side, Bellevue West, and Millard North, and I'm going to talk about Central here in a second, who has the most versatility, in your opinion, in terms of ways that they can get you? And does that enter into your thought process when you talk about upside?
It's probably West Side.
I'm inclined to agree.
With the combination of the way that they can really pressure you on defense and get out in the open court, in addition to a guy like Tate Advadi as a matchup nightmare where Prep, watching that game, they didn't really have a matchup for him. They put Joey Rischel on him, who's a tough kid, but Tate, first touch he got, just caught in the post, muscled through him and went up and finished. Like his ability to finish inside with his strength and continuing to get bigger and stronger, and then he's knocking down the shot. You understand
what I'm kind of saying now that you've seen him firsthand? And I'm not going to label him as a below-the-rim player, but for the way he plays, he's about as crafty around the 10 with his versatility as anybody that I've seen is kind of a tweener in terms of size.
And his understanding of how to get his shots within this offense is so much greater than last year, and that's led to his huge spike in efficiency. And like you look at what he's 17 a game right now on like ridiculous shooting splits.
Well, he's 9 of 10 the other night.
Yeah, and he didn't miss in the first half. He had 20 by halftime and didn't even need to play in the second half really because they already had control of that game.
Yeah, it's interesting. You watch their offensive efficiency, and I was looking at it today and this morning. You know, if you look at 2-point field goal percentage, they have 9 guys shooting 50% or greater from 2-point. Like, you're just not going to see that very often.
Pretty good at the high school level.
Right.
And some of those guys are shooting 60.
Yeah, and you take a look at them from the 3-point line, whether it's, Advadi shooting 44% from 3, C.J. Mitchell shooting 37% from 3, Charlie Davis shooting 47% from 3, Caleb Benning shooting 56% from 3, and all of the aforementioned. I didn't even get to Peyton Gillespie, who's shooting 37% from 3. Now he shot the most.
37% on that volume is pretty good too.
Their ability to score the ball in a variety of ways is.
And then you've got the 3 guards just in the starting lineup, let alone bringing those young guys off the bench. But obviously Chandler, Reggie, and Tate can all get downhill. So you got 3-point shooting, you got drivers, you got a guy that can take advantage of smaller defenders in the post. So they don't necessarily have a dominant back to the basket center where Logan Wilson's more of a kind of a stretch guy, spaces the floor. But Tate does give them that option if he has the right matchups.
And what's funny, and I've said this to Logan, all those other guys can play well, excuse me, and they may not win. If Logan plays well, they're not losing. Like, I feel comfortable in saying that. When he's on, and by that I mean he's kind of, it's just too much, right? When he plays well, it's like, oh boy, you're not shutting down everybody else.
So just to demonstrate how well that West Side is playing right now, last week they outscored their opponents 2 games, Papillion the Vista and Prep. So obviously a top 5 team, and then Papillion the Vista's got some pieces. 168 to 84. They doubled up their opponents last week.
Yeah.
And they did it while shooting over 60% from the field, knocking down 21 threes, and they had 31 assists to 9 turnovers. And they held both teams to 37% shooting.
Okay, so that's the thing right there. The last part, you and I talked about this after the Prep West Side game, and I said, Prep had a hard time. We knew Prep was going to have a hard time scoring. You said, listen, those guards, that backcourt's ability to push you out and pressure you is just disruptive. They did it to Bellevue West. They made Josiah Dotzler work like crazy. They did it to Millard North when they pushed out to the lead late, which the score got out of hand, right? That game was closer for 3.5 quarters than the final at the Metro Holiday Tournaments. And Millard North's the only team that can say, hey, listen, we split with them. When you look at the upside, let's talk Bellevue West and Millard North. Who has the most room for growth in terms of matching up with what you think Westside does well?
That's a good one. So,
I have an opinion. Could I convince you that it's, even though I think Westside would probably prefer to play Bellevue West over Millard North, just because Millard North has some physical. Listen, Harmon and Green, those guys, I think Westside would probably pick Bellevue West, but in terms of who they wanted to play, but Bellevue West has the most versatility in that same vein.
Yeah, I think it would probably be Millard North, tougher matchup, just because
we differ there
because of Jason Green.
Well, and I think Westside would say Millard North is the tougher matchup.
Yeah, and so we saw what Jason Green did to them, obviously, and you mentioned, so they're not there yet, but I feel like there's just a little bit more off the dribble juice with Millard North's young guys. If they can, obviously Westside defended David Harmon really well
West
there.
Has such good potential though.
They do, but you mentioned kind of the way, like, most of their wings, they don't have a lot of guys that are going to make plays off the bounce
downhill
outside of just.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I feel like that ball pressure, we saw it against Bellevue West. You can't
just stand around and shoot.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be able to get downhill.
Exactly. So that's kind of the combination of Jason Green and maybe, obviously they're not there yet, but they've got the potential to be. If some of those guys can give them a little bit more off the bounce, then I think that's where you kind of see just a little bit more versatility there in the way to attack Westside's defense a little bit more. But I mean, I'd love to just watch round robin series between these three teams going back and forth, because they are all very, very good.
So is Central the most dangerous or good on Lincoln Northeast for establishing their dominance amongst the round robin of the Lincoln teams?
Yes, Central, obviously we saw them on Tuesday. They went to Millard North and gave them a fight. 53-48 win for Millard North.
Ugly basketball game.
Yeah, Jason Green kept them quiet, 11 points, although 8 boards, 4 assists, 4 blocks. So kind of stuff in the stat sheet still. But David Harmon, again, stepping up, 24 points, 11 to 15 from the field. We saw last week he shot the ball at a 50% rate from 3, I think, overall, maybe even a little bit better than that. And that's what we were talking about last week, where kind of wondering about the three-point shooting, and he had struggled and finally got some shots to fall. Had a really good week last week. But Central, it kind of falls back into the same thing we're talking about. PJ Davis and Jay Dawson combined 36 points on 15 of 38 shooting. The rest of the team had 12 points on 5 of 11.
Again, probably one of only 2 guys that can get to any spot on the floor in the Metro. It is Jay Dawson and Josiah Dotzler.
Yeah, and so if PJ and Jay aren't going to be, we know the volume is going to be there. They're just, at this point, I don't think you can expect a lot of scoring from anybody else based on the way they play.
What do you think's happening in their backcourt with like DeAndre Brody and like either the doghouse or something? They're starting to tinker with some new lineups and a little more versatility in the backcourt.
Yeah, I think they've kind of shifted more to putting the ball in Jay's hands as kind of the primary, the ball handler, getting PJ on the wing.
Because you saw the Central Lincoln East game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he barely played.
Yeah, he was kind of out of the rotation. They started a Whit Mamer on the wing.
Guy I'm very, very familiar with. Seen him play since he was in the 4th, 5th grade. Another one of those T&E guys.
And Kia Polger, jumped in the starting lineup. They brought Raheem Briggs off the bench. So they're still kind of toying with some different lineups. They got to find something clicking with that supporting cast. But obviously, they are, at this point, they're going to go as far as Dawson and Davis take them. If they're efficient in any given game, they've got as good a chance to outscore the other team between themselves as any duo in the state.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because I think they're the only team in the Metro that has 2 guys capable of getting you 60 on any given night. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if you see those 2 go 30 and 30. Like, they're capable, right? Yeah. I mean, is anybody else really doing that?
I don't think anybody else is getting that amount of the shots either. You've got a little bit more balance everywhere else. So the combination of the talent and the opportunity with the way the team is playing right now. So that's, I mean, those guys can win you any game, and they can lose it to you too if the shots aren't falling. And we know both of them will take some tough shots at times. So that's kind of what Central is right now. I think they're clearly in that 4-5 mix. They've established themselves there, but they still need a little bit more to crack into that top 3. You mentioned Lincoln Northeast. I was there, and they went and won at Lincoln Southwest, beat them for the second time this season. Dogfight, but again, Northeast just finds a way to pull out close games late.
More options.
Xander Beard. Xander Beard is a guy that I thought he'd
We
be
haven't said
scorer.
his name in 3-4 weeks.
Yeah. I thought
here he is as the difference maker this late in the season.
Yeah, I thought he'd be their leading scorer coming in the season. That's been Christian Wynn. But Xander, 21 points, really efficient game, 10-11 from the free throw line, 3 different and ones in that game, knocked down a big 3. So that's kind of, they're 13-2 now. And they've got Grand Island and Elkhorn South. So it's another good week to kind of show that, hey, they belong in that number 5 spot. They belong in the mix for that number 4 spot. They're definitely clearly established themselves as the best. They're 7-1 in Lincoln against Lincoln teams right now.
Yeah, don't look now, but we've talked about them since they beat Bellevue West. Gretna's won 5 in a row.
Oh well, no, they
6 in a row, right?
no, they dropped they lost to Papio South.
Oh, that's right. The Papio South is 54-51.
Yeah.
At the tail end, I forgot all about that over the weekend on Saturday night. Papio South getting to 9-5 got Omaha Gretna to kind of, I say Omaha Gretna, getting Gretna to kind of quell the run. I was getting ready to say, which team would you least like to play? And I was going to put Gretna in the bunch, and you may still feel that way. But outside the top 4, which team would you least like to play if you're one of those A1 through A4 potential seeds?
Yeah, that's Gretna. We talked about this was a big week to kind of distance themselves from the rest of the back end of the top 5, and they pull out the 65-61 double overtime win against Elkhorn South.
I think they ran out of gas, but
and then like if that's because they had to win the fourth quarter 23-14 to get that thing to overtime,
just to get it there.
And then they won in the second overtime, but 51-54 lost to Papio South. Kind of one step forward, one step back. That game, we talked about Papio South, their freshman. Daniel Brocale had 6 points, did not make a shot, did not have an assist in that game, and Papio South won.
Yeah.
I don't know how often that's going to happen.
Well, the slow start, I think Gretna only scored 11 points in the first quarter, which ultimately was their undoing. In that one, kind of playing catch up the rest of the way.
His freshman Bryson Ball led the way with 16 points. Reese Kircher added 10. We talked about those guys.
How about
good upside.
The young pups?
So I mean, Prep fell to number 7 after that loss to Westside. They kind of took care of business against the other teams they played last week. I think at this point, with the injuries, they just got so many guys.
I still think it's his best coaching performance to date. I mean, to have 11 wins out of that team right now is, I think, fantastic.
Yep. And one more note before we go. Obviously, you hear the music going on right now. We need to mention Quinn Johnson from Loomis breaking the state career three-point record.
Loomis.
He went into the Alma game on Thursday needing 7 to break Brady Delmont's record. He hit 10 in the first half. Finished 12 of 17 from 3 for 39 points. And he has got a half a season left to keep adding to that record. I think that one's going to stand for a long time. He's just a phenomenal shooter. Aren't many guys that can get off the volume and efficiency that he has. It doesn't matter what class you play in.
Has surpassed Michelle Patterson, who is now Michelle Kluver, who has a fantastic son as a golfer, as Loomis's most popular athlete in the last 25 years. That's my main man,
incredible
Jacob.
pull.
Hey, listen, you won't get that kind of range anywhere else on a podcast in the state of Nebraska. That's Jacob Padilla. I'm ODB. We'll be back next week with Nebraska Preps Postgame.
A Hurrdat Media Production.